Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Armchair Crew Chief. This is a later episode than normal. A lot of things going on in the world of kid sports, and just wanted to wait a little bit on this one too, just because of what came about on Sunday. And so let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's go ahead and start off. So we had trucks running, and then we had the Cup Series Allstar race, which proved to be in my opinion, a boring race. / it was, somewhat entertaining after the fact. So it was. You started off with like us. It was like, man, this thing is just stupid. And then you found out what happened afterwards, and we'll talk about that. And it was like, oh, this got a little bit interesting. So let's go ahead and jump into the truck race here. Our top five were Taylor Gray, Ty Majeski, Ross Chastain, third, Nick Sanchez second, Christian Eckes first. Going through that into stage one, Corey Heim was fifth, Taylor Gray fourth, Rajah Caruth third, second was Ben Rhodes, and first was Ty Majeski. Going into the second stage, Lane Riggs fifth, Jack Wood fourth, Stuart Friesen, Jake Garcia, and Tyler Ankrum. So it was mixing up a little bit. Saw a little bit of the race. It did happen on. It did get postponed some during the. It was supposed to run Saturday, and it did get postponed some, and it rained, and it really rained. It's one of those things that made it interesting about this weekend. After when you look at the Cup Series All-Star race being how it was, and then you see what happened beforehand on Saturday versus what happened Sunday night, it was pretty wild. So going into our race results here, the ending of the race, you had Sammy Smith coming fifth, Brendan Queen fourth. He did really well. I think this was his rookie running. I think he's the one that they were calling Butterbean. I got confused because I was thinking of the boxer Butterbean when they were saying all that. Lane Riggs third, Grant Enfinger second, Corey Heim first, and Corey Heim ended up running away with it at the end, over a 2-second, almost 2.5 second lead going into it, and ending that race. There we had, as we were saying, lap 59, we had the rain come. They ended up just pretty much, lap 72 was the end of the stage. Then Rajah Caruth, Ty Majeski got into it on lap 93. Lawless Allen got into it. Brett Holmes. This track was very loose. Dean Thompson in there. I thought Dean Thompson was going to take out a lot of people just throughout the whole race. But excuse me, those were those were the cautions and the lead changes. We only had 7 of them. So again, it was one of those things that the whole track was running pretty wide. It was with this repave at North Wilkesboro, where they were able to run us, but they got loose, and they were loose going into turns. You could just see the back end slip and slide a lot throughout this whole race, and I'm surprised there wasn't as many. There weren't more wrecks than there were, or accidents. We only had 7 for a 220 lap race, I believe it was 250. Excuse me. So overall, it kind of. You had more racing than you did last year, but at the same time, the leader just ended up running away with it towards the end, just like it has been. And, hoping that Grant Enfinger would have gotten through there, but unfortunately he didn't. 2.5 second break on that. So we're entering in almost that final stretch. This is 10 to 23 races for the Truck Series. And it'll be interesting to see what we have going forward. I know the playoffs start, or they have that break. I think it's close to mid to end July is whenever their regular season comes to an end, if I remember correctly on that. Moving forward So let's go ahead and talk about the in-between. So the All-Star race, you're supposed to have your opens, your qualifying. They have all kinds of pit road practices and so on, and challenges to win. Well, we got there, and I believe it was 4 inches of rain and 2 hours fell in North Wilkesboro, and they are roughly northwest of Charlotte, if I remember correctly. So they're kind of around on that Smoky Mountain range and area. But anyway, man, it flooded so. I think they said they had 2 feet of water sitting in the turn 1, and they had drivers. One of the drivers for the truck series, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, and a couple of these other guys were just sitting there swimming in it because of how crazy it was, diving in it as as like into a kiddie pool type thing. So I mean, that was wild. That postponed everything. Moving on, we had Christopher Bell's crew win the pit road challenge. That happened beforehand. They were supposed to run the opens and everything like that during this time, which they did not get to. I can't remember how they used to determine who moved on, since they didn't really run the opens. But our fan vote was Noah Gragson, which is good to see. I think people do like to play into him. Young guy, very, I think he's going to be one of the top drivers going forward in the future. Then you had Ty Gibbs get it, and I think it was Bubba Wallace, if I'm not mistaken. They were the other 2 that got into the All-Star race. So, looking into it, the race, they had their, that's where I'm trying to find it. They didn't really run stages. They broke them up a little bit, but they ran 200 laps, and it was, going around. They had some stages where you had to go through it. They had these option tires, which were soft tires. They brought a soft and a mid tire there on the compound. And the soft tire, they said, oh yeah, these things are going to be, I think they were like 0.4 of a second faster. Then they just fell flat and stayed flat. And they were running almost like the mid-grade compound. There was, people were applauding Goodyear for bringing something like this out there. But at the same time, when I look at it, one, I did not like the fact that they kept talking option and prime, because it wasn't really an option tire. You were required to run it at least once. Let's call it by the compound, like some of these other race organizations do. A lot of people just stayed on them. I mean, the fall off wasn't that bad that you were going to get hurt if you came off of them. I mean, nobody was going to blow by you on the original tires, the stock tires, than if you were on the red tires. So I think that kind of idea blew. I think the premise of it, the idea of it, was a good idea. How everything worked out didn't work out according to how NASCAR probably thought it was going to happen. Winner of this race doesn't get into the playoffs. $1 million, I believe, is what it is, and they only get like 10% of it, 8 to 10% of it, but whatever. We had sparks fly at the very beginning of the race, where Ricky Stenhouse started to make it 3 wide. Air kind of pushed Kyle Busch up in the wall. He bounced off the wall, hit Ricky. He decided to retaliate, actually just punted Ricky into the wall, ended his day after lap 2. And moving forward with that, we had 2 leaders of this whole race. Brad Keselowski ran 1 lap, and then Joey Logano 199 laps. Watching the race, one, it was boring because Fox stood on the leader the whole time. You had a little bit of a jockeying with Denny Hamlin, so on and so forth. Joey Logano won this race by 0.6 of a second, but when you look at third place, 4 seconds. I mean, this was almost like it was last year, in my opinion. It was a boring, dull race because you didn't have so much. And then Fox and their broadcasting did not play into this, in my opinion. Play well into this because of the fact you had people fighting for position and moving back and forth. in the back area of this race. Yet, and I say back area, middle area, they were actually moving back and forth, jockeying, like kind of what happens. And people got to realize that when you hear somebody complaining about, there wasn't any racing, it's because you have something like this where it's a 4-second break between first and third. And usually, like last year, it was Larson won it by a 4-second between first and second. So that's what you got to kind of keep in mind when it comes to this idea is, one, you have your broadcasting companies, Fox, NBC, it's going to be Amazon, TNT in the future, CW. They're not showing the hard racing in the middle of the pack. They're still stuck on that front racing. And for a set, they did have a little bit of it there with Denny Hamlin around where he could get the bottom line, but he couldn't complete it. And it was the same thing for like 10 laps, just doing the same thing. And while in the middle of the pack, you actually had guys pass, and then the other driver would come back around. He would pass for like the straightaway, and then the turn. And that's the frustrating part. We've been harping on it, and I know a lot of people have been harping on it with Fox this year, how horrendous their broadcasting has been. They need to get away from, if they're using some AI or whatever they're using, they need to get away from it and go to this. So you had that problem. Then the only person that I noticed that actually made passes that stuck, Bubba Wallace made a few. Truex was going backwards. That's par for Wilkesboro past few times with him in this track. That's kind of frustrating. Is Kyle Larson, because Kyle Larson had to start from the rear of the field because he was actually doing Indy 500 qualifying, and then they actually delayed this race for him. But he came from the back of the pack up and finished fourth. So, he was there. So Joey can get his little celebration, which was overshadowed by what was going on. In my opinion, this race was useless and flat out boring. And this is one of those races that throw it on FS1 because ain't nobody want to watch this snooze fest. So, moving on from there, let's talk about we have a lot of racing coming up this weekend, but let's move into, we had some information, some of the stuff we didn't report on last week that I just flat out missed, so that's my fault. Moving on, there will be a tournament next year. I think Atlanta, they moved it from a fall race to a summer race, Atlanta 2. And so that starts I believe it's a 5-race challenge tournament, if you want to call it, bracket tournament, where you're going to be going up against other drivers. I think you can win $1 million is the one that it is. So that's going to play into it. That's starting TNT's broadcast for their races. I don't know what to make of it. I think when I hear something like this, and I know it's racing versus teams, I think of the NBA's mid-season tournament, which was so silly because the Lakers apparently won it, yet they're not in the playoffs anymore. So it's going to be. I think it might spice it up a little bit for some of these races, at least hopefully bring people into watching it. Now, we're going to have to rely on the fact of the broadcasting TNT to actually show these races on there. Maybe they do like a pay window with somebody else like Max or something where you can watch these battles where, it's like Truex versus Larson or something like that, where you can actually watch these battles, because they're not going to be able to show all these things on TV, and it's going to be nuts. It's going to be crazy. Fox already can't get out of their own way to show some racing that goes on. They're too busy showing fans in the stands and showing empties, and then you have your other people out there complaining because not too many people are at the race, yet there's a lot of people there, or they show sellouts. This is it. All I know is it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. We'll see. Moving forward, as I was saying with the Cup race, the tires didn't really do so much what they wanted them to do. My goodness, there was fighting There was fighting. Ricky, so with this track, just like a Bristol or something else, or like a Dover, you can't, there's no tunnel to leave and go home once you wreck or anything like that. You're stuck there. So Ricky Stenhouse had 198 laps to stew on this thing. He actually parked his car after it wrecked in Kyle Busch's pit box. I mean, this was just bad blood all around. And Ricky waited for Kyle Busch to come back. They started talking. Ricky threw a punch. They started fighting. Ricky Stenhouse Sr. got into it. The pit crew people for Kyle Busch got into it. I mean, it was wild. As far as I can tell, it was only Ricky Stenhouse's crew that this affected. I could be wrong. Some of the other crew people, but and then Ricky called out and said, "I'm going to wreck you at Charlotte." It's like, holy smokes, dude. Yeah, it was wild. That was the best part of the race for me. I mean, honestly. And then NASCAR goes out and makes all these memes. Everybody else makes these memes, and that's where this is the sticking point with that, with what happened, how NASCAR treated it, with the memes and everything like that. This is where it goes to the effect of NASCAR's trying to have their cake and eat it too, and trying to chaos control this, which they just they're making themselves look bad to everybody. And I mean, Daniel Suarez called them out. I'm surprised he's not getting any fined or talking to after this. I feel like NASCAR's turning into NHL when it comes to, you want to push against the system, well, you're going to get in trouble, bub. So anyway, that fight happened. I think they call him Richard Stenhouse. He got into it. Ricky got fined $75,000. His father not allowed to show up at a race, suspended indefinitely from showing up at a race. Some of these crew people got fined, I believe, and maybe suspended a few races. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I couldn't recall reading the article, but Daniel Suarez put this out really well. This was, I really like the way he said this, and some other people were thinking, a lot of people were thinking the same thing. But, you have NASCAR before, so these penalties were levied out on Wednesday. You have NASCAR, not just like NASCAR hardcore memes or, these third parties. No, you had physical NASCAR making memes about this, the picture of, a screenshot or whatever of the video of Kyle Busch walking to his hauler and Ricky there. And they're making memes about this, your plans in 2020 and so on. And it's like, you're going and trying to capitalize on the social media hit of this, yet you're going to fine Ricky for doing this? That's, and they had so many people filming this thing. I mean, like, poor old Bob Pockrass. He was in the middle of it. But you have all these social media people filming this stuff, and, you're taking advantage of the viewers, the hit, the social media hit for this. Yet you're going to fine and suspend and, take a person away from the track indefinitely. That is so two-faced by NASCAR, but it, honestly, I think it's par for NASCAR on how everything is going as well. I mean, they come out and they do all this stuff, and they turn around and then speak out the other side of their mouth. And, Daniel Suarez caught him on that and called him out, and, I'm surprised he's not going to get a talking to about this. That was nuts. That was stupid. That was, it was ignorant on NASCAR's part. I think a lot of people are starting to call NASCAR out on this, meaning how stupid that was. Ricky Stenhouse doing what he did, yeah, he got heated and it was in the moment. You know what? Was it dumb? I think so. But it's not as dumb as NASCAR going out there trying to capitalize on the social media hits for this fight and this argument that broke out, to fining Ricky Stenhouse, suspending Richard Stenhouse. I mean, come on. NASCAR, you done beeped up NASCAR. That was bad on that, in my opinion. Moving on, Kyle Larson got through qualifying last weekend. I think he's running 7th, I think it is, starting 7th. He surprised a lot of people. His practice, I think it was Friday or Saturday, P1 on practice. I mean, he has a legitimate shot of actually doing this. And as much as I don't really, I can't stand Hendrick Motorsports. I don't like them. But it would be kind of cool to see Kyle Larson come out here and win the Indy 500, fly out, win the Coke 600. I think that would be neat because it would shut up a lot of these IndyCar people that are like, oh, he doesn't belong in our sport. This is making it a laughing stock. Well, he just wiped your butt with it, and he's barely been racing this thing. I mean, that shows how much of a talented driver he is. And I recognize his talent because of how he goes around and drives and succeeds. But also, it kind of stains Jimmy Johnson because everybody thinks Jimmy Johnson's the best thing since sliced bread. Yet the dude, when he's not in a Hendrick car, can't handle himself. And he goes out to IndyCar and can't handle himself. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens from there. Let's go ahead and talk about our race. This weekend, Memorial Day weekend, we want to remember and honor our fallen soldiers and military personnel who help keep this great country free, even when we have politicians that are trying their hardest not to do that. But let's move on. This is a race-packed weekend, starting off with the NASCAR series and then ARCA Menards. Friday today at 11:40 Eastern we have practice, 12:40 qualifying for ARCA Menards. Then we go into 1:35 Eastern, 2:05 Eastern practice and qualifying for the truck series. That will be on FS1. Xfinity will hit the track, practice and qualifying at 3:35 and 4:05 Eastern on FS1 as well. Then we hit 6 p.m. Eastern, General Tire 150 ARCA Menards will be on FS1, and MRN will have the radio broadcast on that. Following that race, at 8:30 Eastern today on Friday, North Carolina Education Lottery 200 FS1 MRN, and it will be simulcast on SiriusXM. Moving on to Saturday at 1 Eastern, we have the BetMGM 300 on Fox. PRN's got that broadcast with SiriusXM carrying it. Then we move on to Cup Series practice and qualifying. 5:05 Eastern is practice, FS1 PRN. 5:50 is qualifying. Then Sunday is the triple crown of racing if you are a motorsports fan. And one of these days, I love watching Le Mans. One of these days, I'm going to sit here and watch all 3 races that happen on Memorial Day weekend. That's Sunday. Unfortunately, I have other circumstances that I get put on, which are, I'm not going to lie, that's probably far more important than watching racing and doing stuff, but I still follow it. You have, starting off, I think it's at 8 Eastern, Monaco Grand Prix for Formula One happens. And then we move on to 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Let's see what time it starts. I'm going to give this to you. 12:45 Eastern is driver intros will take place. National Anthem is going to be at 12:24. So we're probably looking at about 1 o'clock race. We'll start. Green flag will drop on the Indianapolis 500. And then after the Indianapolis 500, NASCAR gets to carry it home with the final race at 6 Eastern, the Coca-Cola 600. This is our longest race that we will be doing, 600 miles, 4 stages, and it is one to watch. I love watching this race. Denny Hamlin won it last year, if I remember correctly. Blaney's won it. Truex has won this thing. It's one of those that is I love watching this. It'll be on Fox, PRN, and SiriusXM. Indy 500 is one of those as well that eventually I'd love to go to that race, or even the Brickyard for NASCAR. But this weekend is going to be a racing pack weekend. We also, most of Americans, some of you guys that don't, thank you for your hard work. Have off on Monday, and then everybody's going to be enjoying their barbecues. I hope you guys do the same thing. Please don't forget why we have this holiday weekend. It is to remember our fallen service members and remember the sacrifice they made to keep this great country free. So we will catch you guys next weekend, possibly Wednesday, Tuesday, Tuesday evening, we'll do that with the holiday and to just recap and digest everything going on. We will go from there and see how that happens. Keep a lookout on the Coke 600. It might get postponed a little bit depending on Kyle Larson and getting him into Charlotte. Also, rumor has it that Donald Trump is going to be going to this race as well, which could throw a wrench in the situation. We'll see how this all plays out from there. And I hope you guys have a great weekend and stay safe out there.